This video is brought to you by Keeps. What's up guys, Michael here, and today we're talking about the only secret agent who can say his name faster than Sterling Archer. That's right.
The name's Bond. James Bond.
He's one of just a few iconic characters to have been portrayed on the big screen by a host of different actors. And he's almost the only one who isn't either a superhero, supervillain, or a member of the British royal family. Nowadays, it's not weird to talk about who's gonna play the new Bond, but the idea of recasting the character was once so unthinkable that they considered writing in a plastic surgery subplot to explain why Sean Connery now looked Australian. So what makes Bond so malleable? Why does the character continue to inspire after so many different portrayals, and what can each portrayal tell us about the era it was made for? Let's find out in this Wisecrack Edition on why James Bond won't die. Spoilers ahead for most of the Bond movies. But before we dive in, I want to give a quick shout out to this week's sponsor, Keeps. Keeps is a subscription service that makes it easier and more affordable for guys to treat hair loss. For most guys, a good hair day is an essential part of feeling confident about their looks. This means that losing that hair can be stressful for lots of guys. And since 2 out of 3 men will experience some form of male pattern baldness by the time they're 35, we really mean this affects a lot of guys. The good news is that prevention is key, and with the right plan, you can keep those luscious locks. You can get started with a free consultation with a licensed Keeps doctor who can help you get both FDA-approved prescriptions and over-the-counter medications shipped directly to your home. Your hair loss prevention medication will then automatically arrive every 3 months, so you won't have to worry about waiting in long pharmacy lines while being taunted by discount Halloween candy. And you can message your Keeps doctor 24/7 to ask any questions and update on your progress. You'll find out why Keeps has more 5-star reviews than any of its competitors, and why hundreds of thousands of men trust Keeps for their hair loss prevention. If you're ready to take action and prevent hair loss, go to keeps.com/wisecrack or click the link in the description to receive 50% off your first order. That's keeps.com/wisecrack. Now, back to the show. We're going to focus on the 4 most influential Bonds because you have other to do and we have a deadline. But before we get to that, it's important to understand who Ian Fleming's original Bond was in the first place. When he first scribbled him onto the page in 1953, Fleming was looking for a character who could restore a sense of adventuring, awe-inspiring Britishness to a country that had just limped out of the Second World War. The sun was finally beginning to set on its cherished empire. Basically, the Brits needed a bedtime story to soothe the pain of no longer being allowed to own entire countries. Drawing on his military and intelligence experience, Fleming wrote James Bond as exactly this sort of globe-trotting gentleman. The secret agent moves through the world with a colonizer's confidence, stiff upper lip stoicism, and endless supply of dinner jackets. However, when it came time for Fleming to bring his creation to the big screen, there were some concerns about whether American audiences would connect with such an overwhelmingly British protagonist. They even tried to Americanize him for an early TV series, leading to the only official version of Bond ever to be called Jimmy.
Card sense Jimmy Bond, they call you. I knew you right away.
Fortunately, a certain Scotsman then strolled into frame to put things right. Sean Connery's version of the character was, in some ways, already a serious pivot from the great British cheerleader Fleming had envisioned. His thick accent and self-deprecating charm marked him as a slightly more rugged, working-class figure.
Barbara thanks you for saving his life. You are now his son.
Well, thank you.
More reminiscent of the straight-talking gunslingers that American audiences were used to. He had a steady stream of quippy one-liners, many of which Connery improvised.
I will wear this one in Piccadilly.
You won't. They've just passed some new laws there.
The actor's athletic presence, which the producers called his animal magnetism, as well as his cocksure confidence, guaranteed that he would remain an enduring sex symbol. According to Bob McCabe in his biography of the legendary actor, Connery's Bond was a sensualist, a man who pleased himself first and foremost, and damned the consequence. A classless hero, a man who made his own rules and walked in a world of his own creating. Connery imbued the character with a certain ironic detachment from the whole business of Britishness, with all its delineated pecking orders. While Fleming's Bond was designed as the very personification of his nation, Connery's strength comes from his lack of definitive ties to the Queen. Sure, he was out there protecting crown and country, but he always seemed at least as interested in drinking his martinis and doing sex as he was in protecting the motherland.
Who are you?
My name is Pussy Galore.
I must be dreaming.
This was fitting for the swinging 60s, the pre-women's liberation era of alcohol-soaked playboys like JFK and Frank Sinatra. And Connery's reinvention of Bond was absolutely vital to the character's success. He made him a hero fit for the time and for an international audience, instead of just an ode to one nation's sense of faded glory. The formula for bringing Bond onto the big screen was effectively written. Certain details had to remain in place, like his charm.
Oh, the guns. The gun, of course.
Talent for violence, and fine fashion sense. But the details could be changed to suit the time and place. Of course, Connery famously loathed portraying the renegade secret agent, and eventually dropped out of the series. The next iconic Bond would be Roger Moore, who took up the mantle in 1973. In doing so, he restored a sense of social elegance and sophistication to the character, while also pushing the series in a notably more lighthearted direction. Moore's Bond didn't have Connery's smoldering sexuality or bad boy appeal. And while his films leaned into the character's womanizing even more heavily than before, his politeness and propriety smoothed off the rougher edges of Bond's machismo. He generally seemed more like an amateur sommelier than Mr. Steal Your Girl. And on the surface, that might seem like a return to Fleming's Bond blueprint. This was a Bond who was comfortable in the high-class surroundings which Connery had made a mockery of. He exemplified the kind of mannered intelligence and strategic brilliance that the British Empire wanted to retain as its personal brand. The only problem was that Moore's Bond was also the campiest. He caroused with ladies named
Holly Goodhead
and got attacked by ice hockey players. Altogether, these were ludicrous, semi-parodic films rather than serious spy thrillers. But Moore was very much in on the joke, portraying Bond as a larger-than-life, lightly humorous figure.
A pleasant evening.
And that may not have been exactly what Fleming had in mind. Once again, though, it was the Bond the audience wanted. He was more of an uncomplicated good guy who the whole family could cheer for. Everything else about his adventures reflected this desire for light entertainment too. The villains became even more over the top, and the gadgets got notably goofier. Can anyone get me like a shoe that has a knife inside of it? Does anyone have a pair of flip-flops that become handcuffs? Can someone get me a hat that has a special gadget where your parents tell you they love you in your ears? This was all reflective of the general spoof-happy ambiance of 1970s Hollywood. The parodic nature reflected a cultural shift away from that whole idea of nationalistic heroism. The further audiences moved away from the black and white of World War II and into the messy gray of Vietnam, the less appetite there was for stories which presented fighting for your country as the epitome of good. So, they opted for escapism instead. And Moore's winking presentation of the character gave the viewer permission not to take anything they saw too seriously.
He suggests the trade. The egg for your life.
Well, I'd heard the price of eggs was going up, but isn't that a little high?
And when Pierce Brosnan came on the scene to play 90s Bond, he maintained this comedic self-awareness.
Well, I must say, I've had a lovely evening. You?
Well, once again, the pleasure was all yours.
His version of 007 was, like Moore's, all about zany gadgets and facing off against absurd villains. And somewhat like Moore, Brosnan generally plays these moments for laughs, leaning into the absurdity of it all so that the audience can enjoy the sheer escapism of the whole crazy tale. But he wasn't just a copy and paste of Moore's character. After swinging between social classes in previous depictions, Brosnan's Bond seemed like neither a fussy elite nor a rough-edged working man. As journalist Denisha Smith explains, the Irish-born Mr. Brosnan has an indeterminate accent, not quite High English, not quite Connery, a reflection perhaps of the breakdown of English class lines. His sexuality was similarly caught in between Connery's roguish darkness and Moore's gentlemanly gentleness. In many ways, he embodied the whole metrosexual trend which came to prominence in the 90s. He maintained the emotional restraint and violent potential of traditional Bond machismo, wrapped in an outer layer of soft-skinned, delicate good looks. Basically, he was the first Bond who looked like he had a solid skincare routine locked in. This was a Bond for a new era, a post-Cold War world in which the old hierarchies were being challenged, at least to some degree. It wasn't just the way he looked or spoke, but the whole way this new Bond had to interact with the world around him. The hetero-male fantasy which the character represented would no longer go totally unscrutinized.
Good. Because I think you're a sexist, misogynist dinosaur. A relic of the Cold War.
And the movie's female characters were no longer just there to roll around in bed with Bond. they were kicking ass right alongside him, or growing immune to his charms.
Out on some kind of professional assignment, dressing to kill?
You know you'll find this crushing, 007. But I don't sit at home every night praying for some international incident so I can run down here all dressed up to impress James Bond.
The Brosnan Bond movies were an attempt to find a place for the character in an era of evolving gender norms that mainstream entertainment was expected to at least pay lip service to. They even used the question, is there still a place in the modern world for a secret agent like 007 in promotional materials, explicitly playing to the idea of Bond as an anachronism rather than hiding from it. And while the Brosnan Bond movies were still too lighthearted to fully persuade us of Bond's contemporary relevance, the man who would inherit his 00 status would be far better equipped. In a sense, the broodier, bloodier direction which Daniel Craig took the Bond franchise was really the only place for it to go by 2006. After years of full-blown parodies like Austin Powers and Johnny English took aim at all the series' tropes and cliches, the goofy, self-deprecating humor of Brosnan and Moore just wouldn't really work anymore.
What are you feeding him? Why don't you just kill him?
No, Scott, I have an even better idea. I'm going to place him in an easily escapable situation involving an overly elaborate and exotic death.
So you couldn't really expect an audience to sit through that style of a Bond movie again with a straight face. And at the same time, the success of the Bourne movies had ushered in an era of more serious, grounded spy thrillers. James Bond couldn't just be a well-groomed jokester anymore. He had to be convincing as a trained killer and, more fundamentally, as an actual human being. We needed a Bond who could do the heavier lifting, dramatically speaking, that was expected of a spy thriller in the 21st century. Enter Daniel Craig. When Craig emerges from the water, glistening under the sun and showing off his newly bulked-up body, it's not just for the eye candy. It's making us viscerally aware of Bond's body so that we can watch the toll his work is going to take. The Craig Bond films highlight the battering that he takes throughout each mission, showing his injuries in all their grisly detail, and emphasizing the gruesome things he has to put himself through just to stay alive. Bond still made plenty of time for games of chance and romantic dalliances, but the true stakes of his behavior are always made clear. He lives a life of constant danger, not freewheeling fun, and his more devil-may-care decisions often come with devastating consequences.
Look how well your charm works, James.
The protagonist might still be handsome and quick with the line.
Can you kill him?
Yes.
Will you?
Someone usually dies.
But he was someone whose whole life revolves around doing ugly, often morally questionable things. And this fact was reflected in the haunted, hard-drinking new version of the character.
Vodka martini. Shaken or stirred? Do I look like I give a damn?
As much as he tries to maintain the character's signature steely exterior, this is the first Bond we see carrying his emotional wounds from film to film.
Well, it'd be a pretty cold bastard who didn't want revenge for the death of someone he loved.
You don't have to worry about me. I'm not going to go chasing him. He's not important. And neither was she.
In every other iteration, 007 seemed to reset completely between missions, the agent turning up as crisp and clean as his new dinner suit. By the time Craig's version gets to Skyfall, the psychological and physical toll of being James Bond is made painfully clear.
Medical evaluation, fail. Physical evaluation, fail. Psychological evaluation, alcohol and substance addiction indicated. Oof.
This moody, brooding Bond was not one designed for nationalistic myth-making, but for a post-9/11 world in which the brutality and ambiguity of global conflicts was being broadcasted daily. It's a revisionist portrayal which owns the physical and psychological damage which a real-life James Bond would undergo. It still gave audiences the debonair, all-action fantasy they'd come to expect, but it also complicated it, forcing them to reckon with his coldness and his brutality. So at the end of the day, Bond has not only survived explosions, bullet wounds, and razor-rimmed hats, but he's withstood the passage of time more successfully than almost any other pop culture figure. So we're left with the same question that everyone from Dr. No to Blofeld is agonized over. Why is James Bond so damn hard to kill? The answer might lie in the fact that, as an international man of mystery, the question of who 007 exactly is has always been intentionally shrouded in uncertainty. Scholar Christopher Lindner suggests that the key key to Bond's longevity is his status as a highly unstable and often ambiguous cultural icon. From his inception, Bond has always been less of a flesh and blood man than a kind of ideal. His height, hair color, accent, and general character have all changed massively over the years as he has gone from blowing up bad guys with explosive toothpaste,
Dentonite toothpaste, to be used sparingly. It's the latest in plastic explosive.
to battling the gruesome effects of age and alcoholism. And author Craig Owens argues that Bond is not the collection of various characteristics. Rather, he is the blank middle they fill in. He is an opening, a vacant, unclaimed potentiality, rather than an ontologically assignable identity. And so we get to fill Bond's famed tuxedo with whoever we need him to be at that moment in history. His adventures have adapted to our changing taste, with the campy, gadget-filled iterations of the 90s giving way to the grittier, more grounded style of the 2000s.
Were you expecting an exploding pen? We don't really go in for that anymore.
As a result, Bond is able to retain his appeal from one decade to the next. Even his taste and trends change completely, with a new incarnation of the character arriving tailor-made to meet each audience's demands. But what do you guys think? Will there eventually come a day where James Bond simply has to be put into retirement? Or is he such a potent and pliable symbol that we can keep reinventing him forever? Let us know in the comments. Thanks as always to our patrons for all your support, and remember to check out our podcast. Wrestle that subscribe button like it's a pre-CGI shark, and don't forget to ring that bell. And as always, thanks for watching. Later.